Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this educational webinar, Owning Foreign Properties in Your Self-Directed IRA. You know, this question of can I purchase foreign properties with my retirement funds have come up so many times, and such an intriguing concept that we thought would be a good idea if we dedicate a whole webinar on just that, talking about, real estate in general, but more and more specific offshore properties. My name is Munzer Ghosheh with the Entrust Group. I'm your co-presenter for today's webinar. I'll be discussing with you the basics of self-directed IRAs, touch up on prohibited transactions, disqualified persons, talk about how to invest in real estate using your retirement funds, and much more. My special guest and co-presenter is Brian Koslow. He's an expert in the Panama real estate market and a veteran in the real estate industry. He'll be discussing with you, among other things, investing in Panama real estate market, what the pros and cons of residential, commercial, and hospitality real estate markets. So as you can see, we're going to have a lot to cover. Brian will go first. Then I will provide you, again, with a quick overview of Entrust and self-directed IRAs. Then we get to our popular Q&A section, which I am sure you'll have a few questions for Brian and myself. I'm going to ask you to keep your questions to the end of our presentations. So just please type your questions on the chat box, and we will try to get to all of them as time permits. So before I introduce Brian, just please allow me to read this disclaimer to you. The Entrust Group does not provide investment advice or endorse any products. All information and materials are for educational purposes only. All parties are encouraged to consult with their attorneys, accountants, and financial advisors before entering into any type of investment. Well, welcome, Brian. Good morning.
Thank you, Munzer. Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. So we're all excited to hear your part of the presentation. So go ahead, please take it away.
Thank you, Munzer. Let me begin by saying I've been in real estate now for approximately 25 years. First as an investor with my own funds, building my own portfolio, and then later on I became involved in the REO industry working with banks. Following that business that I had built with a partner, I got involved in Panama, Central America. And at first going to Panama, I remember it was actually quite funny. My family, of course, thought I was crazy. And then after my family thought I was crazy, my friends thought I was crazy. And my business associates would raise an eyebrow and say, well, what can you possibly be doing in Panama, Central America? But actually, Panama, some may know, has been growing economically faster than India and China combined. It's really been doing quite well in spite of the world's recession. So I've become an expert in Panama real estate, been going there for about half a month, every month for the past 7 years. I actually leave this Sunday for a week and a half, and I'll be there once again. Panama geographically is situated just below the center of the United States. You can see on the slide coming up on your screen, if you were to take a trajectory directly below Houston, or Dallas, you'd probably come pretty close to where Panama is. It's just between there and Miami. The trip to Texas to Panama runs about 4 hours, 4.5 hours, and to Miami, believe it or not, is only 2.5 hours. I remember the first couple of trips I made down there, I was quite surprised that it could actually be done faster than going from Miami to Pennsylvania or Miami to New York. So it's really quite close. And because of the way Panama is situated from east to west, it really is a sideways, so to speak. It's an east to west country. It really avoids every hurricane. There's never been a hurricane in Panama. So I got pretty well involved in the real estate market in Panama and been involved ever since really the last 7 years of growth, which has really been quite phenomenal. Let me speak for a moment to those looking to put monies into foreign real estate and foreign assets. I think one of the first and most important aspects is is to look at whether or not you're planning to manage the real estate. So one of the things that occurs to me is that when I was purchasing real estate in the United States and I had it in my backyard or I had it within arm's reach, I could get to it in a car, it was really quite easy to manage. You could buy a foreclosure. Maybe you'd have to pay the mortgage in the first couple of months while you were fixing it up, and you'd have to pay the insurance and the taxes and everything else. But by and large, you could spend the time fixing it up if you wanted to make it an active investment. You really can't do that with offshore real estate. With offshore real estate, you've got to find something that's passive. And sometimes people say to me who are looking at Panama real estate, well, gee, if I'm looking for passive real estate, should I be looking in foreign jurisdictions at co-ops, condominiums where I could rent them out? And my answer to that is that you still need to be willing to manage your real estate to some extent, actively manage your real estate if you're going to own condos or condominiums. The reason for that is you're still a landlord. The cable television is still going to break. Someone sooner or later, unfortunately, is going to break a faucet or a mirror or a kitchen cabinet, and someone's going to have to go in and fix it. So it does require oversight and management. So when you are buying in foreign territory, I highly recommend that you stay with properties that are passive from the standpoint that you don't have to be hands-on, you don't have to physically be at the property, you don't have to make the repairs, you don't have to oversee what's happening at the property. So in effect, you're looking for cash flow and possibly appreciation as well, but you're looking for those two things in passive type investments or passive type purchases. And I'm going to talk a bit about that as we move on in the slide presentation. Panama, of course, before we just move off this slide, I just want to say that Panama, of course, is home to the Panama Canal. And if you look at Panama on this map, if you're able to see it, it's just about 3/4 down in the center of the screen above Colombia. You can see the little dot. That little dot is actually right where the Panama Canal is. It's only 52 miles long and goes through the most narrow part of Panama. And, of course, it is an annuity to the country. It's like an ATM machine sitting in the middle of the ocean. Ka-ching, ka-ching, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The largest ships are paying somewhere around $400,000 for the privilege of going through that 52-mile stretch. And, of course, it does save them the over 10,000-mile trip around the Horn of South America. So it is a bargain from that standpoint, and it also saves a lot of time for those big cargo ships to go around. So it's an interesting asset for a country to have, certainly a monopoly, so to speak. Well, you'll see on your screen now, coming up on the screen, a couple of pictures of Panama. We are going to focus primarily on real estate, but I do want you to get a flavor for Panama. It is a very modern country. It's very quickly becoming a first world country. Many people say that Panama is very much akin to Singapore or baby Singapore. You could see the modernization of Panama taking place in the right-hand part of the screen right now. Those buildings that you see did not exist 6 years ago. 6 years ago, that was landfill in the ocean, and there was nothing on that land. I was actually in Panama 7 years ago, and I can tell you there was nothing there. So all of those skyscrapers are brand new, and you can see behind those skyscrapers there's quite a few others. Panama is actually geographically home to the tallest building in Latin America. It's 81 or 82 stories tall. You can see the Trump building in this picture. It's 66 stories tall. It is also home to the largest retail mall in Latin America, the largest wholesale mall in Latin America, and the second largest free trade zone in the world after Hong Kong. So it's really quite a progressive country in the hub of Latin America. You can see the ship on the upper left. That ship is a Panamax standard, which means it's 96 feet wide. They cannot make them larger than 96 feet because the size of the canal is only 100 feet wide. When it was built 100 years ago, the largest steamship would go through the Panama Canal and could almost go through sideways. So that gives you an idea of how much larger ships have become in the past 100 years. Actually, the canal is being expanded right now with a new sea lane, which will allow the super tankers to go through up to 300 feet wide. What that will do for the country is allow the fees, the duties that they charge for the ships to come through with the containers to actually go up about triple, because the cargo itself will just about triple. So a lot of revenue coming into the country of Panama, so much so that if you divided the free cash flow from the Panama Canal by the number of people in Panama's population, you'd find that there's about $600,000 excess per person in Panama. So it's really quite an interesting country with 3.4 million people. Anyway, whether you decide to buy property in Panama or you decide to buy in other foreign jurisdictions, there will probably be a number of similarities. Of course, you can put property into your IRA as long as it's a self-directed IRA, and Munzer can speak to that a lot more officially than I can, since he deals with it literally every day in and out. My work primarily on the ground in Panama is with passive cash flow opportunities, and as a result, I work very heavily in the hospitality market because you can buy condominium hotel units in Panama. They have very low overhead because the cost of labor, unions, taxes, insurance they're there. There are some costs, but they're so small and so fractional for what it would be to the rest of the world, particularly North America or Northern Europe. It's really quite a bargain. You can also build buildings in Panama for about half the price than you can build for almost anywhere in the United States. And what that means is that the purchase you make is about half the cost, but yet hotels are able to charge almost twice as much as they do in most other parts of the world because the demand in Panama is so great because the economy is growing so quickly and so many big companies, multinational global companies, are relocating their headquarters, their Latin American headquarters, to Panama, that there's an enormous demand on the hotel rooms there. So we happen to like, when I say we, my company, my partners, our team, likes very much the passive opportunity that cash flow and hospitality industry represents, the cash flow in the hospitality industry represents. So let's talk about the different opportunities. First, pros and cons of the market. We talked a little bit about passive versus active. I frankly believe to have something that you're having to manage in a foreign jurisdiction, unless you're traveling to that foreign jurisdiction and able to pick up and leave on a day or 2 days' notice, frankly, I would not advise strategically to be purchasing active real estate because it's just difficult to manage it unless it's in your backyard. Again, foreclosures or any type of these more modern types of purchases that you see on the markets now because of the collapse in the real estate market in North America, those are difficult to find in Latin America because the markets there are very strong. So there really are no foreclosures, so to speak. So really, even if you want to find a foreclosure, how would you spend the time there unless you were looking to retire in Panama or actually move to a foreign jurisdiction to manage it? So again, passive cash flow is the way to go. And I believe within that segment, you've got to look at the commercial market because commercial cash flows are strong and more reliable, I believe. I mean, you've got to assess that for yourself. But I think you have to do diligence. You'll find that the commercial market's a stronger market and a more elastic market from the standpoint that big companies are moving to Panama very quickly and make the market very, very strong. Hospitality subset is very powerful, again, because of the big companies. Also, in Panama in particular, you have a new convention center coming in, being built by the government. There already are 36 casino licenses. Add casinos to a convention center, and you have Las Vegas. It is difficult now for foreigners to come into the United States. They have to wait weeks in some cases. In Panama, that's not the case. So they had gambling. They had nice hotels, including Trump, Wyndham, Sheraton, Marriott, and you do have big names there. More big names coming in. So these are factors that are driving the economy and actually supporting the growth of the economy. The economy is driving the hospitality industry, not the other way around. So we've got the different opportunities. The SDIRA process Munzer can speak to. We should talk about the risks of investing in Panama real estate, any foreign real estate jurisdiction. I'll give you what I believe to be the biggest risk is in the area of construction that is not out of the ground. And this is something I think you really got to be aware of. Construction that's not out of the ground in Panama is riskier than anything out of the ground. And you might say, well, that's true anywhere. Yes, but it's more true in a foreign jurisdiction. Because in some foreign jurisdictions, the banks require that the money not be held in escrow and that the money be used for the construction. So your money, in effect, even if it's transferred in the United States or transferred in a foreign country, doesn't matter. when something is being built in a foreign jurisdiction, one of your first questions needs to be, will there be escrow? And you'll probably find in most cases the answer is no, because legally they can't hold escrow. They have to allow the builder to use those monies to build, and therefore if you're going to buy pre-construction, you ought to get a very strong discount because once it's out of the ground, I believe a project is more stable. So, one of the things that my partner, my team, myself, one of the reasons we spend as much time on the ground as we do is because we look for established developers, which is another thing. You've got to look for established developers. Don't go with a developer who's new, who's got their first project coming out, or their second or third. You've really got to look for a track record. So this is what we do for our due diligence, and we think it's important for you to do it as well. Another risk in a foreign real estate market, this is a very good thing to talk about because it is a pitfall and a lot of people fall into it. It's a sinkhole. Let me explain what that is. And that is ROP, which means rights of possession. In foreign jurisdictions, a lot of times you don't have titled land. What happens is that their titling process might be something more modern to the country. Some countries don't have it at all. In Panama, you do have it because it is a modern country and there is titling. However, there are still some properties that are ROP, again, rights of possession. So a developer might be very happy, or a broker or an agent might be very happy for you to purchase property to go build your house, retirement home, your dream home, or build a project on. But if there is no title and it is ROP, someone can come and dispute the title of that land. That is to me, a critical ingredient. Frankly, personally, my own dollars, I would never buy ROP property. Again, some people do. For me, I think it's an enormous risk because you never know who really owns that land. Banking records and other records in foreign countries are not always well kept. So you can have someone from a family, and it could be a rich and powerful family, show up and say the land that you built your beautiful new dream home on happens to be owned by their cousin. Not something I want to find out on when I wake up after building my dream home. I really highly recommend you buy titled land only. And again, this is something as part of the due diligence process. How do you reduce the risks? Well, a lawyer can assure that land is in fact titled. I think that's important versus the ROP. You can assure that a developer has built other projects, perhaps even similar projects. For example, in the hospitality industry, we always make sure that we're working with a developer that's built 2 or 3 other hotels in their history, and perhaps has even built as many as 30 or 40 other developments. We make sure that they have a track record. These are important things to reduce the risk. I don't know that you can really reduce the risk much on the escrow issue. Probably, the best way to reduce that risk, I would say, is to have part of your deposit, have it broken up. Rather than put all your deposit in at once, have it broken up and have your second or third deposit only go in once construction starts. In other words, it does not leave the USA or whatever country you're based in, you're domiciled in. It doesn't leave your account until construction starts. You may have to put 10% down, you may have to put 20% down, but that still mitigates your risk rather than putting 30% down or 40% down, which oftentimes in foreign jurisdictions is required. By the way, the banks typically are the ones that require it because the owners in a project become you in effect. You will ultimately own title. You'll ultimately own units in the project or a unit in the project in your IRA or not. So ultimately, to reduce the risk of the bank, they want you to have your deposit used toward construction. So my advice would be to have part of that deposit wait until the construction is out of the ground. I think that's the best way to reduce the risk. Final considerations before making the investment. Again, track record I think is probably the biggest thing. You certainly want to look at numbers, and you certainly want to do your due diligence regarding the industry that you're buying in. For example, condominiums, do your due diligence and look at that industry. Look at what the rules are if you own a condominium. They're different than they are in the States. The governing body is different. The HOA, for example, is what you would call it in the United States. You wouldn't call it that in Panama, for example. It would be the managing member or the managing partner's management company that manages the building. But you have to look at those considerations as well. In each jurisdiction, each foreign jurisdiction will probably be different. Again, if you're not buying in Panama and you're buying in more of a third world type country, I would make sure, just really look for the titling of the property. You really don't want a surprise when you find out, that some political person's nephew, cousin, brother, sister, or them themselves really own the land, or even someone who's not a political figure. It's just not a good day to find out that it's not your property after you paid for it, of course. But make sure it's titled. All right, I think I covered actually some of this slide. Waterfront we should talk about. Now, waterfront is an interesting area to build on. I can speak to Panama more particularly because I know Panama so well and the rules and the laws there. But in Panama, there's a certain amount of footage in from the ocean and out to the ocean that is owned by the country. In other words, it's owned by the government. It's sovereign. It's not something you can build on, not even a temporary building. And usually they will not issue a permit for any building within a certain amount of feet from the beach. So that's something to look for also in your contract, in your purchase contract. If someone says you have exclusivity to the beach or the beach is private or that you can build up to a certain point in the beach, you want to verify that. My guess is that there's a lot of restrictions and you ought to be very careful. Title insurance is available, but typically most people don't get it. And the reason is really not the cost. The reason is that the banks don't require it. If you look in the United States, Canada, and other countries, one of the reasons why people get title insurance is because the banks the primary reason is the banks require it. In foreign countries, oftentimes the banks don't. Title insurance in Panama is a relatively new concept. You can get it. It's not more or less expensive than most other countries, so it's not about the cost. It really comes down to whether or not you think you need it. Most developers already have title insurance on the property. So, for example, if you're buying a lot to build your dream home, that lot is usually governed by a broader title that covers, the whole 600 acres or 6,000 acres or whatever the larger lot is. So you may want to check on that. You probably don't have to have it, but again, do your own due diligence. And you can listen to your attorney on that rather than me. I think would probably be a better idea because you'll be advised there from a legal perspective, which I can't do. I'm not an attorney. Panama property and most other foreign jurisdictions, by the way, you do want to put in a corporation as opposed to an individual. And of course, in the case of the SDR of the self-directed IRA, you're covered there in any event. It's really done for asset protection. More than any other reason, and any attorney would advise you to put it in a corporation or a trust or an IRA rather than putting it in your individual name. It's really, again, like I said, it's done for asset protection more than anything else. Panama corporations, you can sell the shares of a Panama corporation. Also, Panama still has bearer shares. And the way bearer shares work is essentially, let's say, for example, I have a Panama corporation. I have bearer shares. I have 100% of the shares. If I hand those shares over to you, you now own the corporation. So they're the bearer of those shares, just like bearer bonds or anything else. Now, I have heard that Panama is going to make those obsolete, that they're obsoleting the bearer shares in the future. I don't believe that's happened yet. There's probably a phase-in period. So if that's something that's important to you, probably if you are going to do something in Panama, you probably want to do it sooner than later. Normal closing costs are a little bit less than they are in the United States typically. Runs about 1% of the property purchase price. Real estate tax exoneration, when you're working with, first of all, real estate tax in Panama and many foreign countries is very low. It's not like you find in other countries like North America. The reason is that in North America, your real estate taxes are paying for the pensions of the police department, the fire department, other local utilities and services. Also, your local taxes pay for the schools, and they also pay for the hospitals. In many cases, even if the hospitals are not in your backyard or in your town, you could be covering the bonds for the hospitals in your real estate taxes in the United States and some other countries. In Panama, generally, that's not true. Real estate taxes are fractional, 0.25% or in some cases a little less or a little more. Exoneration is an interesting concept. What the government of Panama did in their wisdom is in order to generate, for example, more hotels, because there weren't enough hotels, there still aren't enough hotels, what they did was they gave a 20-year tax abatement or tax exoneration for certain tourist, what they consider to be tourist properties. And hotels, in many cases, if they started their development or purchase of property and filing of plans within a certain date, they fell within that exoneration period. So you may want to look into that. Again, taxes, even if you have real estate taxes in a foreign country, generally speaking, they're very small. So it may not be as big of a factor. Again, in foreign countries, you really don't have the big unions, so you don't have the same kind of labor rules. If you have repairs done, it doesn't take 3 or 4 people and an inspector. It's typically, a local guy or person that comes in. It's just less rules and less oversight, and also less taxes, less insurance. I'll give you an example. In Panama, again, speaking to Panama because I happen to know that country best, the banks don't require any type of homeowners insurance. So the only insurance you're required to have, and that's only some banks, is fire insurance, and fire insurance is very inexpensive. So, it may only be $100 or $200 a year. It's very inexpensive. So, and that's because there's very few fires, and the reason there's very few fires is if you look at the way buildings are built in Panama, they don't use wood. Different types of wood are very much protected in Panama as part of the ecology. So, they use concrete, and concrete typically doesn't burn, doesn't catch on fire. So there's far fewer fires. As far as needing an attorney, I would recommend having an attorney. I think the question is when do you need the attorney? Not do you need an attorney. And I believe the best time to have an attorney is the time of closing. That's the best time, in my opinion. Of course, you may feel more comfortable having one sooner. I'm not sure what work the attorney would do for you sooner. I think, more so you'd need the attorney at closing time than you would at, initially investigating a project or a property. All right, let's go to the next slide. Mortgages are available in Panama and also most other foreign countries that I know of. Again, that may have something to do with how much developed the country is. Panama is very quickly becoming a first world country with higher ratings by Moody's and Fitch and Standard & Poor's, upgrading Panama recently and even quite just shortly before that they upgraded Panama. So Panama is becoming a first world country, again, very much like Singapore is. So mortgages are available. They're very friendly to foreigners in Panama at the banks. And the process is not as stringent as it is in the United States. For example, they don't have the same credit checking and income checking. They may ask you to verify, they may ask you for documents that verify your income, but they may not go through the same laborious task of checking on everything and affidavits on everything and cross-signatures on everything. They don't go through that whole process. And one of the reasons is because the banks require a minimum of 30% down on a property, they are protected. They know that you're in it for 30%. It's not like the States or other countries where you put 10% down and you may back out. So, or you don't have much to risk if they mortgage the other 90%. In Panama, at best, you're going to get a 70% mortgage. So their exposure is far less, and also real estate values have been climbing, and the banks know that. So something you buy at pre-construction today, the banks know is probably going to be worth substantially more at the time of closing anyway. So the mortgages are available in Panama for foreigners. You can also obtain a mortgage inside your self-directed IRA. So that's good news as well. Typical rates and terms are very similar to the United States. One thing that's different, this is interesting. I remember when I first found this out, I thought it was very clever. In Panama, they typically will give you a length of term on your mortgage based on how old you are. It's not always the case. I've seen people 60 years old, 65 years old getting 15-year mortgages, so it's not always the case. But typically, most banks will look at how old you are. So if you're 20 years old, they know that the average lifespan is about 76 years old. They will give you a 56-year mortgage in many cases because you're 20 years old. So now they see that you're going to live for an average lifespan 76. They give you the mortgage based on lifespan. If you're 50 years old, they might give you up to a 26-year mortgage. I think it's very clever. So rather than doing it based on the property, they do it based on the person making the mortgage note, the person borrowing the funds. Again, there are exceptions to the rule. I have seen people much older who have gotten mortgages for 15-year terms, so they are available in any event. But for the most part, banks do base it on your age, which is kind of interesting. It may be that they don't do that in other countries based on discrimination laws. I'm really not quite sure. But I do think it's a novel idea to base it on the time period that a person will live, a lifespan, as opposed to a property's lifespan. Insurances we've already talked about. Typically just fire insurance is needed. It's very inexpensive. Homeowners insurance is an optional item. The banks don't require it typically. Some banks do require life insurance. They'll require you to sign it over to them. So in the event that you die, again, they look at the note as going to you, not to the property. So in the event that you pass on, they'll want to be paid on the note. Not all banks do require it. Some do. The process of contracting a property is very easy. There's no notary required. You could actually do it in the mail. You could see a property online. You can see a property through a desk share or a webinar. You can reserve the property. You can purchase the property. Everything can be done in contracting online. There's no recording contract until closing. So again, until a property closes, there's no public recording of a contract. The contract is a private contract. It becomes recorded at closing, and you do receive a deed and a title to the property in Panama. Again, that assumes that it's titled property. You have to make sure it's not ROP property. You don't need to be present at the closing. Many things have been done by mail. Again, there's no notaries, which is kind of different and interesting than most other countries. And your documents can be in English, but if for any reason you have to go to a court proceeding, they will have to be transferred and translated into Spanish. Most documents in Panama are in English, and what they do is have a clause that says that they will have a licensed translator translate in the event of any challenge to the contract or any dispute. So, and either party can do that. So typically that's the way it's done. All right. Well, we all know what's happening with debt in our country. It's certainly not looking pretty, and therefore, because of the debt, because of the fiscal cliff, because of the problems both politically and economically and the gridlock, most people are concerned about their IRAs and are looking to diversify at least some of their portfolio into foreign property, especially foreign property that offers cash flow. It's very important. By the way, the cash flow does go back into your IRA. You cannot move the cash flow outside of your IRA until retirement or unless you're willing to pay a penalty. Again, Munzer can speak more to that. But the cash flow in a property, let's say a hospitality property like a hotel that spins off cash flow, must go back into your IRA. The good news is you're deferring your taxes on that income just like you would any money in your IRA, so that's a big advantage. Of course, the Entrust Group are specialists, and you should speak with them. Anything to do with your self-directed IRA and owning foreign property in your IRA. I want to just briefly introduce the advisory team that I have, that I'm with. We do see ourselves as advisors more than anything else because people will ask us questions about retirement or moving or working. There's lots of opportunities to work in Panama. They actually have work visas. Believe it or not, their unemployment rate is so low, and anybody who wants a job can pretty much find one. It's the exact opposite of what's going on in the rest of the world. It's pretty incredible how resilient they are there. They're growing like crazy. But anyway, on our team we have Grady Palmer. He is incredible as an informational source as what's happening in the United States and Europe, the debasing of the U.S. dollar, the everything that's happening politically and economically. He studies very, very hard. He's a huge resource, and I realize his phone number and email is not on there, but if you contact David or myself, we'll be able to give you that information. Grady does move around a bit, and we'll be able to give you his current information. Dave Waltzer is actually Dr. Waltzer, my partner. David is great. He knows a lot about IRAs, probably not as much about as Munzer does, and you're a specialist, of course, at Entrust, but he knows a lot about how they work, and that's why we do refer to Entrust. But you can speak to David. That's his phone number, the 203 number. He's based in Connecticut, and he spends about as much time down in Panama as I do, about half a month every month. You also see his email address there. And I'm speaking with you now. It's Brian, and I appreciate this time that we've spent together, and I'm going to hand the baton back over to Munzer so that he can wrap up the presentation. Munzer.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Yes. It was I'm sure everyone's going to agree with me out there that this was very informative. Sure, we'll have a lot of questions, and I see a couple already. As far as questions are concerned, please go ahead and type those questions in the chat box, and we'll get to them as time permits. But let me just go ahead and give you a kind of quick overview about self-directed IRAs and about our company here. So, again, Munzer Ghosheh here with you with the Entrust Group. I just want to start by providing you a quick overview of us, the Entrust Group. For those of you out there that are unfamiliar with our services, we're the nation's premier provider for self-directed IRAs, retirement plans. We work with individuals and small business owners, for that matter, who want to control their own investment decisions when it comes to their retirement funds. We only offer truly self-directed plans, allowing our clients to invest in all allowable assets, not just the securities, mutual funds, CDs that are out there. What makes us unique is we don't sell or promote any products. We just do the administration record keeping for your plan. We've been in business for over 30 years, and we have over 14,000 clients, and we nearly manage about $2 billion in investor assets. But we really pride ourselves on the education that we provide to our clients, whether it's through our national webinars or educational webinars that we have right now with Brian, or the local in-person events that we hold throughout our local offices, which we have throughout the nation. Also for our professionals out there, we offer approved continuing education programs, CE programs, to whether they're realtors, CPAs, and attorneys. So what do our clients invest in? What are the investment choices? Again, keep in mind at Entrust, we do not sell any products or give any investment advice. So individuals come to us with an investment in mind. All we do is we purchase and hold the asset for them and do the record keeping. Our clients invest in over 50 different investment options, and they do get creative. Here's a few of what we see our clients investing in. I mean, by far, real estate is probably the most popular asset out there, whether it's single family, multi-unit homes, apartments, condominiums, larger deals on commercial properties, raw land. We see that as pretty popular. Foreign property. Brian went in great details about that, and it's really many times we get clients calling and thinking that they can only invest, locally or in their state that they live in. That's a misconception. You can invest nationwide. You can invest offshore, for that matter. It might sound complicated, but really it just requires many of the same steps when purchasing properties locally. In addition, you probably want to do your own basic due diligence, as Brian was mentioning, on the country you're interested in investing. For instance, know the rules and regulations. You might want to verify that the title can be held in the name of an IRA, or some countries, for instance, will only allow IRA-owned corporations to hold title, for instance. I think Brian mentioned Panama is one of those. So the main question we get when individuals are interested in purchasing offshore properties, foreign properties, is, can I live or vacation in the property owned by my IRA? And the answer to that is obviously no. Same rules and regulations apply to a property owned overseas as it would owned here. Again, it's for investment only. You can't live in it or vacation at it, and we'll get to that in just a second. Other investment options, real quick, we're not going to spend much time on that, is, for instance, trust deeds, notes secured by real estate. We have a lot of individuals investing in that. Precious metals is very, very popular. Limited partnerships. You can do unsecured notes with your IRAs, and other exotic investments such as life settlements and others. But again, for more information on that, either visit our website or call my office. I'd be more than happy to discuss the other investment options that are available. It's easier to figure out what you cannot invest in. Really, these are investments that the IRS specifically state are not permissible assets. You cannot hold these assets or buy them with your IRA. Very few, as you can see. Collectibles, any work of art, rugs, antiques, any metal or gem. Obviously, there are exceptions: gold, silver, platinum, palladium, bullions of certain purity. Those are allowed. Any stamp or coin, any alcoholic beverages, life insurance products, and S corps. S corporations prohibit IRAs to invest in them. So as you can see, there's very few investment restrictions listed under this IRS Code 4975. We want to be aware of, though, that there are certain transactions as opposed to investments that are prohibited. And in order to determine whether a transaction is prohibited or not, we would need to understand who is considered in the IRS world as a disqualified person. That is a person who cannot do business with your IRA. I want you to think of your IRA as a completely separate entity than yourself. So let's say if your IRA purchases a real estate property, again, locally or overseas, foreign properties, certain family members cannot do business with your retirement plan. Otherwise, if they do, it's considered a prohibited transaction. These disqualified persons obviously would be you for your IRA, your spouse, parents, grandparents, children. So anyone you can think of that is up or down, ascendants or descendants, you cannot do transactions with when it comes to your IRA. So what are some of the examples of prohibited transactions between this disqualified person and an IRA? Well, the most important thing is you can't buy, sell, or exchange. Many times we have clients calling and asking, can I have my IRA purchase a property that I already own, or my father owns, or my son? And obviously the answer to that is no. Furnishing goods or services. For instance, you cannot manage the property your IRA owns. And Brian alluded to that as far as foreign properties being a passive investment and not being able to manage it. So that kind of works perfectly with an IRA because you can't really manage that property in the first place. If you are in the business of buying properties, rehabbing them, and selling them, you cannot be the contractor for that. It has to be a third party. So again, key points here with your IRA and real estate is no self-dealing, can buy or sell between yourself and disqualified persons, and no personal use. You can't live or vacation at that property. So in general, you buy from a third party, you rent to a third party, and then eventually if you want to sell it, you want to sell it to a third party. Again, investment only. As long as the IRA owns the property, you or any disqualified persons cannot live in that property. So we talked about some prohibited transactions. What are examples of acceptable transactions here between you and your IRA? One would be partnering with yourself. So let's say your IRA wants to purchase a larger deal, commercial property or a fourplex or what have you. You can partner, you as an entity and your IRA as an entity, partner together as long as it's a new deal, going to purchase a property from a third party. That you can do. Another example would be partnering with your cousin. Again, a cousin is not a disqualified person in the first place, so you can partner with them at any time. Partnering with your spouse, since he or she is a disqualified person, then again, it will have to be on a new deal. So many times we see clients partnering with three members, for instance, his IRA, her IRA, and their personal funds to come in and purchase a property. That is an acceptable transaction. Leasing the property to your siblings. We talked about direct descendants and descendants. Ironically, per IRS rules, siblings are fine. So you can lease to your brother or sister as long as you're dealing with them as if it's a third party with fair market value prices. Okay. let's talk about plan types, and really I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, only just to say that all plan types can be self-directed. If you have a traditional IRA at a bank, B of A, what have you, now you transfer it over to an Entrust, it becomes self-directed, very simple. You have a Roth IRA at Schwab, transfer it over to Entrust, now it becomes a truly self-directed IRA. See, self-directed IRA is just a term, not a type of an IRA. A lot of times clients call us and they're looking at our application and they cannot check the box, they can't find the box to check for self-directed. Well, there is no such thing. It's just a term. The traditional IRA you have now becomes self-directed here. Roth IRA you have, transferred to Entrust, now becomes a self-directed IRA. As far as 401k plans, pension plans, 457, 403bs, the main thing you want to be aware of here is, for the most part, we are talking about previous employers. If you separated from employment and you no longer are working there, your choices are as such. You can keep it at your previous employer, transfer or roll it over to your new employer, or roll it over to an IRA. And that's how we see a lot of those rollovers are done. If you're still presently employed, chances are your administrator will not allow you to roll that over unless it's a case by case really, unless you're totally vested or you have a provision in there that allows you for in-service withdrawals. But ask start with your human resources or your administrator and see if that option is open for you. But again, if you're a job changer and you have a qualified plan or profit sharing plan or 401k, previous employer, we can definitely be able to roll that over into a self-directed IRA for you here. So real quick, 3 easy steps to kind of taking control and financial freedom for yourself. The first step is getting an account open. Very simple. Complete our paperwork. 1 to 2 business days, your account is open. 2 would be funding your account. Funding your account generally is either 2 ways. A transfer, which is coming from another IRA trustee, or a rollover, which is coming from a previous 401k administrator. Time involved in that really varies, but industry standard is about 2 to 3 weeks. So you want to make sure, what I'm trying to say here is, if you have an investment in mind, let's say buying a piece of property, whether it's here or overseas, open up the account. Let us work on funding it so the funds are available at Entrust. Then go out there, step 3, identify, do your due diligence on the assets so we can purchase it for you. So there's so many ways to learn more. One would be take advantage of the local offices that you have by schedule a meeting at one of those offices. Visit our educational website for a list of calendar events that we have, whether they're more webinars or more in-person events. Take advantage of our free reports and much more. Speaking of events, I just want to take make a quick mention of a special one-day event that we're proud of, that we're sponsored by us, by Entrust, coming up next month, October 18th, in LA. It's an all-day event filled with educational workshops, topics, including talking about responsibilities of self-directed investors, doing your own due diligence, tips to help you avoid fraud. There's going to be a lot of time for networking sessions and much more. I highly recommend to look into, if you're in the area, to attend that. Don't miss out on it. For more information, visit our website or call my office. Be happy to give you more information on that. So this concludes my portion of this presentation. And I want to get to, I think we have some questions here from our listeners. Dan has a question, and I believe that would be for Brian. Can a Panama property be owned by Panamanian corporation as well as an individual, Brian?
I think I understand his question. In terms of a corporation, the shares of a corporation are owned by the individual. But I think what you're asking is, can a individual be a partner with a corporation, and can the corporation and individual together then as a partnership buy a condominium or buy a piece of property? I am not 100% sure of the answer, but I can't see any reason why not. I think I would have to defer to an attorney that I know to get that answer. But it would seem to me that you can have two different types of entities, which is what this is. The Panama Corporation is one entity. The individual is another entity. And they could join together and buy anything, for that matter, whether it's business or anything outside of the IRA, because that question is for outside of the IRA. But going back again to the point, I don't know that you'd want to own it as an individual. From an asset protection standpoint, and also for a taxation, the local foreign jurisdiction taxation is higher when you sell it as an individual than it is as a corporation. So that's one of the reasons why there's so many hundreds of thousands of corporations in foreign countries. A lot of times they own properties rather than it being under the individual's name. So
yes.
Yeah.
Brian, obviously in the case of the IRA, it cannot be in the name of the individual. I mean, it has to be held in the name of the IRA, but some countries, as you mentioned, will only allow you to IRA-owned corporations to hold titles. So what we see is corporation is set up, and the IRA becomes a member of it, a single member, and then therefore goes out there and purchases the properties. But those questions obviously are attorney questions, and neither Brian nor I are attorneys, nor can we give you any legal advice. It's part of doing the due diligence in the country you want to invest in. Know the rules and regulations of the country that you want to invest in. It's very simple. Another question from Kamyar is, would you create an entity in Panama to hold the Panama International Real Estate Holding, or hold it directly with the self-directed IRA? Brian?
I think that might be your question, Munzer. Isn't it done as a custodian? It's their name as custodian, isn't it?
Well, the member is, yes. I mean, the entity is set up, and then the member of the entity is the Entrust Group for the benefit of, John Smith, IRA so-and-so. So It's going to be an IRA-owned corporation, yes. Okay.
And I think you might have passed one question there. Dee had a question about the non-IRA properties.
Which one?
About a 1031. There's a 1031 question there.
For non-IRA properties, can 1031 exchange be used? I'm not really.
Yes.
If it's a non-IRA property, well, 1031 exchange, and this is inherently tax-preferred, deferred mechanisms anyway. We've seen that very few times where, one would partner with their IRA to go ahead and purchase a like property in exchange, but it's a kind of a complicated process, but we've seen it once or twice, yes. Mm-hmm. Robert has a question on how is Entrust compensated, what costs could be expected to act as a custodian of a self-directed IRA. Well, our fee schedule is really very simple. We have two options for you, the client, to choose from. There's just a $50 setup fee on either one of those. There's a $95 funding fee one time if it's a non-real estate transaction, or $125 for a real estate transaction. And then going forward, your first option would be based on number of assets. So anything could be an asset. A piece of property could be an asset. And that's $295 a year, flat fee. The other option is based on the total value of your account. It's a percentage basis points sliding scale, roughly about 0.5% of the total value of your account. So generally speaking, if you're doing 2 or less investments, you might be better off with the first option, which is per asset. If you're doing multiple investments with us, you might want to choose a second option. In the case of real estate, most, if not all, individuals start with first option. They're just trying out with one. investment. It's just a flat fee, regardless of what the value of your account, $295 a year. Julio has a question. Would it be better to have the LLC in the U.S. rather than Panama?
I can answer that.
Brian?
Yeah, Julio. Yeah, I can tell you that on many of the properties that I've seen go to closing, even though the initial contracts might be put in a domestic LLC, when they go to closing, the attorneys typically advise to put it in a local jurisdiction corporation because the property is in a local jurisdiction, and because again, part of the strategy of putting a property into a local jurisdiction corporation or entity, LLC, company or corporation, the purpose of it is for a reduction of taxes when you actually sell the unit or sell the property. So the question you have may be driven by one thing, but at the end of the day, you may actually be looking at another. You may actually be looking at taxes at the end of the day as opposed to some other reason that you're looking at putting in the LLC right now. So for tax purposes, what's usually advised, and I've seen done at closing, again, is people taking an LLC that they might have had, let's say, in the United States, and actually forming a corporation in Panama or trust and putting the property in that. And that's based on their advice of the attorneys. I don't know all the reasons why, but I know that that's done quite frequently. So there must be some reasons for it.
Great. Thank you, Brian. And again, as far as questions about LLCs, creating those, I mean, obviously you want to seek legal counsel on that one, as always. So that brings us to the end of our webinar. We just have one more minute. I just want to thank Brian Koslow again for joining us today. The information has been very, very educational, very informative. We thank you, Brian. Please go ahead and just give us one more time your contact information for our listeners out there that might want to reach out to you via email or give you a call if they're interested. Thank you,
Munzer. It's Brian Koslow, and my email address is Brian, BRIAN, at PanamaUnicorn.com. PanamaUnicorn.com. And my phone number, it's a USA phone number, East Coast, 954-347-2492. Again, it's 954-347-2492. Great. Thank you, Brian, again, once again. And for as far as if you have any questions about self-directed IRAs, how they work, and all that, my information is on the screen. My email address is the first letter, my name, my last name spelled out. It's MGHOSHEH at theentrustgroup.com. Number is 310-899-3811. So that brings us to the conclusion of our webinar today. I want to thank you all for joining us. I hope to see you again, and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. Please stand by.